Здравствуйте.
Good afternoon, dear colleagues, dear members of the Dissertation Board, dear guests. Today is the 1st of April, 2021. It's 3 p.m. Moscow time. We're beginning this session of the Dissertation Council for the defense of the dissertation by Elena Zakharova. The dissertation is submitted in conformity for the requirement for the academic degree of the Doctor of Psychological Sciences. The specialty is 190004. The topic of the dissertation is Model of Psychosocial Follow-up of Patients with TB. Under the order issued by St. Petersburg State University on the 21st of December 2020, I, Svetlana Posachova, Doctor of Psychological Sciences, Professor of St. Petersburg State University, have been appointed the chairperson of the Dissertation Board. The other members of the Dissertation Board have been appointed by the same order. They are Professor Valentina Babkov, Doctor of Medical Sciences, St. Petersburg State University, Professor of the Department of Medical Psychology and Psychophysiology, Professor Elena Vaknin, Doctor of Psychological Sciences, Assistant Professor, Russian State Pedagogical University, Professor Svetlana Solovyova, Doctor of Psychological Sciences, Professor of Northwestern State Medical University, Professor Marat Asanovich, Doctor of Medical Sciences, Professor, Head of the Department of Medical Psychology and Psychotherapy in Grodno State Medical University, Belarus. Professor Asanovich, can you hear us? Yes, I can hear you perfectly well. I'm not a full professor, unfortunately, but I believe you're a doctor of medical sciences. Oh, I'm sorry. The degree seeker, Elena Zakharova, is also here. Her research advisor, Professor Olga Shilkova, Doctor of Psychological Sciences, Professor, is also here with us. She is a professor of St. Petersburg State University. I would like to ask the members of the Dissertation Board who are attending this session via video conferencing to switch off their microphones. Please make sure that your microphone is switched on when you are given the floor. This session of the Dissertation Board is being recorded and broadcast on the website of St. Petersburg State University. The session is being interpreted into English. You can ask questions and make comments using the email address that you can find on the official web page. The technical personnel will refer the questions to me, and I will read them out during the discussion. This will allow you to participate in the discussion. I will read out your questions during the discussion. I would like to highlight that the questions are supposed to be relevant to the contents of the dissertation. The authors of the questions are to write down their name, position, and workplace. The questions that are not relevant to the dissertation will not be read out. Questions without the authors will also not be read out. Under the relevant order issued by St. Petersburg State University, on the procedure of granting academic degree at St. Petersburg State University. This session of the Dissertation Board is duly constituted, provided at least 2/3 of the members of the Dissertation Board are present. The total number is not to be fewer than 4 people. This Dissertation Board consists of 5 people, 5 of which are present, including 1 member of the Dissertation Board who is participating in this session via video conferencing system. Therefore, we have a quorum. The agenda of our session is as follows. The session will last about 2 hours. Number 1, the chairman's presentation about the documents submitted by the academic degree seeker and their conformity with the requirements. Number 2, the presentation given by the academic degree seeker to provide an overview and findings of the research. Questions to the academic degree seeker about the presentation and answers to the questions. Reviews of the dissertation. The members of the Dissertation Board will be taking the floor in turns. The comments about the reviews and answers to the questions. The chairman's review of the dissertation, about 10 minutes. The degree seeker's replies to the comments and questions in the reviews, no more than 20 minutes. Open discussion. The floor will be given to the members of the audience. They can give a brief account of their ideas or ask questions about the research. It is necessary to fill in the registration form and give their full name before the talk. The chairperson will read out the questions received via email.
Диссертационного совета на сайте СПбГУ.
I would like to highlight that longer questions will not be read out. The replies of the degree seeker. Next, presentation of the research supervisor, no more than 3 minutes. Deliberations of the members of the Dissertation Board before an open balloting on conferring or non-conferring the academic degree. The discussion of the results is not broadcast. Open balloting and vote counting and recording of the results in the protocol. Making a decision on whether to confer or not to confer the academic degree, and a closing speech, no more than 2 minutes. Dear colleagues, do you have any questions or objections about the agenda? You don't have any objections, do you? Since there are no objections, I would like to proceed with the agenda. First of all, I would like to ask you to switch off your mobile phones or put them on silent mode. The members of the Dissertation Board who are attending this session via video conferencing system, please do not switch off your mobile phones. So, the dissertation is submitted in conformity with the requirements for the academic degree of the Doctor of Psychological Sciences, Specialty 190004, Medical Psychology. The topic of the dissertation is Model of Psychosocial Follow-up of Patients with Tuberculosis. The dissertation was approved for the defense by the order of the Academic Secretary of St. Petersburg State University. The dissertation was completed in Samara Medical University. The research advisor is Professor Olga Shilkova, Doctor of Psychological Sciences. The degree seeker has published a number of research papers. She has published 15 papers 14 papers have been published in peer-reviewed journals recommended by the Ministry of Education and Science, and 1 paper has been published in the Web of Science journal. The degree seeker has submitted a full set of documents to the Academic Secretary of St. Petersburg State University. The documents are in compliance with Section 3 of the order. The documents are stored in the dossier, and they are in compliance with the requirements. The representative of the Department for Dissertation Council Management has the copies of the documents. Before giving the floor to the academic degree seeker, I would like to ask the members of the Dissertation Council, do you have any questions about the documents, or do you think I should read out the list of documents submitted by the degree seeker? No questions? Since there are no questions, the floor is given to Elena Zakharova. You have 20 minutes. Should you have any questions about the presentation, you will be given a chance to ask your questions after the presentation. So, the floor is yours. You're welcome. Dear members of the Dissertation Council, the dissertation is relevant because tuberculosis has been posing a challenge in the global healthcare system. The strategy to combat tuberculosis before 2030 include the following items. They are patient-centered approach, psychosocial follow-up of patients, and different others. Today there are many papers which are devoted to psychosocial follow-up of adults. However, these research papers are by no means complete and comprehensive. Moreover, there is a lack of research in the area of psychosocial follow-up of children and adolescents with tuberculosis. Therefore, there's a necessity to develop a model of psychosocial follow-up of patients with TB, which would include prevention of MRTB and non-compliance. The object of the dissertation is to develop a model of psychosocial follow-up of patients with tuberculosis and to promote compliance in these patients. The object of the research is compliance in patients with TB. The subject of the study is the characteristics of children and teenagers with TB. The hypothesis of the dissertation is as follows. The model allows us to provide psychosocial follow-up of patients with TB, namely children and teenagers. The empirical study was conducted between 1999 and 2017. Children and adults with TB were included in the research. The sampling included 1,100 people. In order to conduct statistical analysis, I divided the patients according to their demographic characteristics. The inclusion criteria are as follows: informed consent and the number of diagnoses that you can see on this slide. Children and adults from the city of Samara participated in the research. The methods employed in the research you can see on this slide. it was necessary to identify the factors that promote non-compliance in different age groups. The idea was to identify the highest risk of non-compliance among patients with TB. We can say the following thing here. Children say that their quality of life becomes lower after the diagnosis. The older the child, the lower his quality of life, or at least according to their assessment. The assessment criteria were as following: behavior, intellect, popularity, happiness, and so on. Children and teenagers divide their life before TB and after TB. They believe that their health would be much better without tuberculosis. Children aged between 7 and 10 do not have any negative attitude to the disease. They take it for granted. Children of 11 and 12 years old have a more serious attitude and have a more negative attitude to the disease. Moreover, they have a negative attitude to the treatment. Teenagers between 13 and 18 underestimate the severity of their disease. Teenagers try to demonstrate that they are not worried about their disease. They do not comply with their treatment as well. In general, we were able to identify marked differences between different age groups. The attitude to the disease changes as the disease progresses and as children become older. The critical moment of the forming of negative attitude is between 13 and 15. Moreover, this is also accompanied by poor relations with their peers and parents. Children demonstrate social frustration in the following area: relations with their parents, friends, the opposite sex, their teachers, independence, and so on. Children in the experimental group really valued their relations with mothers, peers, and teachers. And the level of social frustration was different according to the age group. In subgroups of children aged 11 and 12 and 13 and 15, the children were not satisfied with many aspects. We also identified a number of criteria for the age groups between 11 and 12 and 16 and 18. We also received some significant statistical differences in such criteria as financial situation and the way of life. Children between 7 and 12. In this group, the anxiety criteria was very significant. For children between 13 and 14 years old, the anxiety criteria was also important. Teenagers of 15 demonstrated a high level of anxiety in different areas. 16-year-old teenagers demonstrated the following types of anxiety: anxiety in different situations, anxiety in different types of environment, and so on. Teenagers between 17 and 18 also demonstrated different types of anxiety. Multi-factor study allowed us to identify the following personal characteristics. They were predisposed to criticize other people. They were also predisposed to demonstrate high level of activity. They were easily impacted by other people's opinion. Moreover, they were easily included in different social groups. When they were frustrated, they demonstrated aggression. Moreover, they were also predisposed to conflicts with their peers. Teenagers between 13 and 15 are more quick-tempered than 16-18-year-old teenagers. However, teenagers aged 16 and 18 did not tolerate any outside pressure. Their motivation was high, however, the frustration level was very low, or rather the frustration threshold was very low. Teenagers also highlighted that their mothers were non-compliant and they were very frustrated about it. Moreover, mothers also try to exert total control of their life. However, mothers did not want to participate in their life and to develop emotional bond with their children. Therefore, the teenagers were disoriented and they were predisposed to confrontations with their peers and with their parents as well. The teenagers in the experimental group demonstrated the following coping strategies: confrontation and distancing, self-control employed by young males between 16 and 18. 13-15-year-old teenagers, however, were ready to take responsibilities for their actions. Sometimes teenagers try to underestimate the situation and the disease as well. We also studied the compliance of patients. The social compliance was high for 16-18-year-olds and low for 13-15-year-olds. The emotional compliance was marked in the group of 13-15-year-old patients. Low level of compliance was diagnosed in 8% of 13-15-year-old teenagers and in 4% of the group of teenagers of 16-18-year-old. The severity of the disease was very often underestimated, which led to non-compliance. I conducted factor analysis and regression analysis. I was able to identify the following factors: age 7 to 10 anxiety, social adjustment; 11-12 years old, social adjustment, relationship with the mother; 13-15-year-old, anxiety; 16-18-year-old, compliance. I also studied adults with TB. In most cases, they were frustrated and dissatisfied with their way of life. Many of them demonstrated a high level of social frustration, and 1% had a highly significant social frustration. 31% had an indefinite level of frustration. Social frustration in adults was formed in teenagers, in younger adults. Patients with TB are characterized by other diseases as well, namely abnormalities with cardiovascular system. They also have sleeping disorders and different other psychological problems. Patients with TB are not well adjusted, and sometimes they cannot assess their disease. In many cases, they cannot demonstrate coping strategies. The attitude to the disease could be divided into 3 areas, which you can see on this slide. I I would like to highlight that in many cases, patients are characterized by poor adjustment and also aggression. In many cases, they blame the others on their disease and sometimes use their disease to achieve their goals. 86% of patients with TB realize that it's important to treat their disease. And it is possible to develop compliance in these patients. Other patients with TB, however, were not ready to demonstrate compliance. I developed different mathematical models and also studies the factors that lead to compliance or non-compliance in patients with TB. Here I identified different psychological factors. I included in the group adults and children. Therefore, I came to the conclusion that it was necessary to develop a model of psychosocial follow-up of patients with TB. The model should include different criteria and different characteristics. Moreover, it was necessary to improve their life quality. The model included, or rather the development of the model included several stages. I studied different characteristics of patients with TB. Then I developed treatment targets and identified what can develop compliance with treatment. The idea was to develop methods of psychosocial follow-up that would allow us to develop compliance in these patients and to make these patients comply with the treatment. The patient, or rather the work, was supposed to be done in teams. The teams of doctors were to include different specializations. Moreover, the model included both the patients and their families. The clinical psychologist was to work with children and teenagers in an inpatient hospital. He was supposed to conduct group therapy and individual therapy as well. During outpatient therapy, the clinical psychologist was also to provide therapeutic consultations. Here you can see the functions of the model that I have developed. The model allows us to check the hypothesis that we have developed and also to obtain some qualitative and quantitative data. The model allows us to assess the situation, and it is also can be used for predictions and forecasts. The main principles of psychosocial follow-up are as follows: patient-centered approach, keeping cooperation with the patients and their families. The clinical psychologist does his work in stages. At the first stage, the clinical psychologist takes the medical history and gets the informed consent from the patient. At the next stage, the clinical psychologist assesses the patient and then includes others, doctors and specialists in the team. The psychosocial follow-up includes working with the patient and with the patient's families. Cooperation with other doctors and social workers is also important. Each age subgroup has its own target. therapeutic target. The model includes a number of methods that can be used. These models allow the doctors to get a comprehensive picture therapeutic methods are different. They include developing of communicative skills, family consultations, and so on. The teamwork is also important, as well as consultations provided by other specialists. The follow-up is conducted at different levels. At the main level, the idea here is to help the patient adjust to the treatment and to prevent neurosis. At the crisis level, the idea is to promote compliance in patients and to prevent social disadaptation. The emergency level is also important. It is conducted when the patient is not ready to comply with the treatment and when the patient wants to stop adherence to the treatment. The results are supposed to be assessed and analyzed after they have been conducted. Clinical psychologists must use different resources in order to help their patients. The majority of patients realize that their disease is severe, therefore it is possible to make them comply with the treatment. The other patients, however, are at risk group and sometimes they do not follow the treatment. As a result, their non-compliance can lead to the development of MRTB. So, there are different factors that are supposed to be included in the model. The model allows us to obtain different types of data. I have also conducted some statistical research, and we can assess the level of compliance in different types of patients with TB. The model allows us to show the structure of psychosocial follow-up and also to forecast social disadaptation and non-compliance. The follow-up can be started at any stage of treatment. During psychosocial follow-up, the members of the patient's family can also be included. It proves that the model is very flexible. And it is also a comprehensive one. Thank you. Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Dear members of the Dissertation Board, do you have any questions about the presentation? Professor Solovyova, on your slide you showed the data which you obtained due to regression analysis. One of the aspects was negative emotions. What do you mean when you say negative emotions? For example, Professor Anokhin used to say biological emotions cannot destroy our body. Professor Solovyova, when I say negative emotions, I mean one of the factors in one of the models. It was included in one of the models, therefore I did not change the name. However, I agree with you. I believe that what is given to us naturally cannot destroy our body. However, when it comes to the psychosomatic essence of tuberculosis, I can say that pessimism and despair are part and parcel of tuberculosis. Are you satisfied with the answer? Yes, thank you. Are there any other questions? I would like to ask you a general question. It's a general one, but it's quite important. You used psychological methods to assess patients with tuberculosis. These patients still have their specific personalities. They suffer from different personal problems. They come across different challenges in their environment. Some of them lose their jobs. You analyzed the psychological data. Why do you think that the data was connected with TB, not with some other impact? Thank you very much for your question. The patients that participated in the research did not have any psychiatric diagnosis in their medical history. Moreover, the methods which are employed were quite numerous. The methods allowed me to assess the patients in a comprehensive way. Among other things, I made use of the clinical interview with the patient. And it was possible for us to realize whether something was formed after the patient was admitted to hospital or before. Usually patients spend between 8 and 9 months in hospitals if there are no complications. This is enough time to assess the patient, and this is enough time to talk to the patient's families. This is a set of personal characteristics which were displayed before the disease and after the disease. Thank you very much. I'm satisfied with the answer. Are there any other questions? I have a question, or rather two questions. You describe your model as a psychosocial model. How do you understand this term? Why, for example, didn't you name it medical psychosocial model? Professor Posokova, thank you for the question. There are models of middle scale psychosocial follow-up. I'm not a doctor, so I couldn't include the medical aspect into my model. Therefore, I'm competent only to speak about psychosocial follow-up. Social environment is specific when it comes to patients with TB, and it is well-known fact that almost any person is a carrier of TB infection, but not everybody becomes ill. So it is a set of environmental factors which lead to tuberculosis. Therefore, I was interested in psychosocial factors that lead to tuberculosis, not in medical ones. You have presented lots of material devoted to psychological characteristics. Can you say what impact did tuberculosis have on the development of these children? Tuberculosis is a very serious disease. However, it is an interesting disease for a medical psychologist. On the one thing, there are factors which lead to the development of tuberculosis, and the disease itself has an impact on the development. The child is constantly stressed. Usually such children come from families with other patients with TB. Long-term inpatient treatment is quite challenging. Moreover, family members are afraid to become ill themselves. Therefore, children with TB and teenagers with TB are often isolated from their families. They are sometimes rejected by their families. They have to change the environment drastically, and they have to spend a long time in an inpatient hospital. When it comes to anxiety and compliance and other factors, I believe that children and teenagers must change their behavior, must change their stereotype. They have to adjust to the disease, to their parents, and to the environment. They must adjust to the doctors and to other children. Thank you very much. As far as I understand, there are no external reviews. Thank you very much. Now I will give the floor to the members of the Dissertation Council. And I would like to ask Elena Zakharova to provide answers after each review. Moreover, I would like to say that all the reviews are posted on the official website of St. Petersburg State University. So please focus on the most relevant parts of your review. The floor is given to Professor Valentin Ababkov. The topic of the research is relevant because the prevalence of tuberculosis is quite high. Moreover, tuberculosis is really hard to treat. The situation is also exacerbated by the fact that the psychological aspect has not been thoroughly studied. I was really impressed by the following figure. In 2018, 10 million people contracted tuberculosis and 1.2 million people died of tuberculosis in 2018, which is comparable with the death rate from COVID-19. I would like to highlight that Elena Zakharova uses modern and adequate methods. Moreover, she conducts statistical analysis of the data that she has obtained. The dissertation is well structured and well written. The empirical part of the dissertation is closely related to the theoretical part. The theoretical part includes 5 chapters. She presents a detailed analysis of the theoretical papers. The author of the dissertation describes the characteristics of a large group of patients, including children and adults. She gives a detailed description of the stages of treatment. I believe her methods of research are in line with the objective of the dissertation. I believe that the dissertation is valid and the research outcomes are also credible. The recommendations and research outcomes are valid. I'm not going to go into detail here. The degree seeker uses a number of valid methods in her research, including experimental methods. The dissertation, or rather the topic of the dissertation, is also novel. The author of the dissertation focuses on the psychological characteristics of patients with tuberculosis, including such a characteristic as compliance to treatment. The research findings allowed the author of the dissertation to develop a model of psychosocial follow-up of patients with TB. Therefore, I believe that the research findings are valid. She has developed a concept for her study, and the empirical study is based on the theoretical foundations. The research also contains the hypothesis, which is later proved. The degree seeker has collected a lot of material, and she has also conducted statistical analysis of the data. She also has published a number of papers. The dissertation has a traditional structure. It has an introduction and several chapters. It also has a large reference list. 377 items in the Russian language. The overall number of reference items is 481. The English translation reflects the Russian text. In general, I can say that the dissertation is valid. The methods that are used in the dissertation are in line with the objectives of the dissertation, and the research findings are in compliance with the objectives of the dissertation. She has provides a rationale for all her research findings. I also have some comments and questions about the dissertation. I would like to highlight the following. Coping behavior is not technically described technically correct in the dissertation. Coping has a scientific meaning as well, since coping is related to coping with stress. However, this comment does not change the overall positive assessment of the dissertation. But in general, the dissertation complies with the major requirements. And I have two questions. Okay, how do you believe that your approach is feasible? Do you believe that what you propose in your dissertation can be applied in practice? My second question. You speak about cognitive behavioral, psychodynamic, and different other approaches in psychotherapy. How can we use these methods when helping patients when healthcare has limited resources? So the dissertation complies with the major requirements set forth in order issued by St. Petersburg State University on the procedure of granting academic degrees in St. Petersburg State University, and Elena Zakharova can be awarded the academic degree of the Doctor of Psychological Sciences. The specialty is 190004, Medical Psychology. The dissertation is compliant with Section 11 of the above-mentioned order. Thank you. Thank you very much for your review. Now I give the floor to Elena Zakharova. As for practical application of the research findings, I would like to say the following. Patients with TB spend a lot of time in hospitals. And the model is to be implemented by a team of specialists, depending on the hospital. Therefore, I believe that there is enough time to provide this treatment. We have enough time to help the patients, and the patients are usually happy to leave to work with a clinical psychologist, and that they are really thankful for this chance to talk to the clinical psychologist. And we also work with parents when they attend the hospital or when they come to the appointment with the doctor. The second question was about the resources of the healthcare. My model includes a whole range of methods. It doesn't mean that all the methods are to be employed. This is a case-by-case method, and I believe that individual approach is usually important here. The clinical psychologist decides which of the methods are to be employed for each particular patient. Moreover, group therapy is also possible here. Therefore, it is possible to use this model even though the resources of healthcare is limited. Thank you very much. I'm satisfied with your answers. I asked these questions so that you could focus on the practical application of your research findings. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I give the floor to Elena. Thank you very much for giving me the floor. I believe that the topic is relevant, especially nowadays during the pandemic. And the psychosocial aspect is also relevant. Social distancing, mask wearing, and different other aspects also have an impact on our life. It makes us more responsible. Tuberculosis is also a dangerous infection. In Russia, over the past several years, we have seen a decrease in TB. However, tuberculosis is still a serious disease and a dangerous disease. It is very similar to COVID-19. If one person has tuberculosis, then all the others are also at risk. So I believe that psychosocial aspect is extremely important. Treatment of tuberculosis takes a lot of time. Patients have to change their lifestyle. Patients with tuberculosis have to change their lives drastically. This leads to the deterioration of their life standards, and in many cases it doesn't end well. Therefore, compliance to treatment is instrumental for patients with TB. I believe that children and teenagers are a very difficult group of patients because sometimes they do not understand how serious their disease is. So I believe that working with children is extremely important. Moreover, I would like to say that contemporary research does not provide a comprehensive picture in this area. There is no psychosocial follow-up available for children and teenagers. You have conducted a comparative analysis of different factors related to compliance to treatment. You have also identified factors that lead to compliance to treatment. And you have focused on specific age groups. Compliance, life standards, spiritual aspect, self-control are very important factors. The degree seeker also has identified therapeutic targets for different age groups. And here, family environment, negative attitude to hospitalization, predisposition to aggression, are important. You have also written about non-motivated fears, frustration, ineffective coping mechanisms. You have also written about the forecast of the progression of the disease, which is extremely important. And finally, the degree seeker has developed a model of psychosocial follow-up. What I like about this model is that it is very well written. It is described in much detail. When I was reading this research, I realized that you need a team of specialists to implement this model, because the model takes into account specific characteristics and age groups. You have conducted a lot of research. I believe you have implemented this in practice. The empirical part of the dissertation is in line with the theoretical foundations. The degree seeker uses a number of relevant methods which are in line with the objectives of the dissertation. Moreover, the sampling is also quite impressive. The structure is traditional. I would like to highlight that the degree seeker has used a number of statistical methods, and I believe that the degree seeker can get merit for using these statistical methods. The degree seeker has developed a very interesting psychosocial follow-up, which describes the process and the structure of the follow-up. The model also allows us to forecast that there's going to be non-compliance. The implementation of this model can be started at any stage. Moreover, the follow-up is a very flexible process, and the members of the family can be included at any stage. It proves that the model is flexible enough to undergo changes when necessary. The research outcomes, I believe, are valid and credible. The model takes into account demographical characteristics of patients with tuberculosis. The model also allows to forecast risks. namely the risks associated with non-compliance. The 30, or rather 16 research outcomes are valid and credible. The degree seeker has published 19 papers. And the degree seeker has made a number of presentations at different conferences. In general, the dissertation is well written. One of the merits of the dissertation is that it is very logically structured. It contains a theoretical aspect and an empirical aspect. However, I have some comments. First of all, there are too many graphs and figures, I believe. Sometimes there are too many details in the dissertation. I believe the clinical cases would have been quite useful in the dissertation. I also have 3 questions. What were the inclusion criteria for the children and teenagers group? Which factor triggers non-compliance in the children and teenagers group and also in the adults group? Is it possible to use the model that you have developed to follow up patients with other diseases? I would like to highlight that the questions do not change the overall positive assessment of the dissertation. The dissertation by Elena Zakharova, Model of Psychosocial Follow-up of Patients with TB, is a complete research paper. The topic of the dissertation is relevant and novel. The research findings can also be implemented in practice. I believe that the dissertation is well written and well structured. It is also valid and credible. The dissertation complies with the major requirements set forth in Order 6821/1 as of the 1st of September 2016. And Elena Zakharova can be awarded the academic degree of the Doctor of Psychological Sciences. Specialty is 190004, Medical Psychology. The dissertation is compliant with Section 11 of the above-mentioned order. Thank you. The floor is given to the degree seeker. Thank you very much for your questions. I included a lot of graphs and figures in my dissertation. However, I described more than 100 factors in my dissertation. Therefore, I believe it was necessary to give a detailed description of each factor. I believe the contents of the dissertation should be transparent. Yes, I believe it is probably overloaded with details and with figures and graphs. However, this makes the research outcomes more transparent. Yes, I believe clinical cases are also important. However, each clinical case is described in many words. So I couldn't include them in the dissertation. I couldn't add another several dozens of pages in the dissertation. As for the inclusion criteria, I wanted to identify the age where the patient can start to demonstrate non-compliance. In 1999, I conducted a pilot study, and even during the pilot study, I realized that sometimes there is a situation when the child stops adhering to treatment, and I wanted to identify what triggers non-compliance. Therefore, I divided the children's group into such small groups. As for the trigger factors, I believe that each age group has its own factors. For children aged 7-15, it is connected with poor relationship with their mothers and high level of anxiety. Why relationship with mothers is so important? In many families, fathers did not participate in their behavior, or they were in prisons, or they were in hospitals themselves. So in many families, there were children who did not know their fathers or didn't remember their fathers. Therefore, it was important to start a relationship with their mothers. For ages 16-18, children begin to feel guilty. They feel guilty that they are real. They feel guilty that they do not work. When it comes to patients over 18, they're dissatisfied with their low life standard. They are pessimistic, and this pessimism is prevalent among patients with TB. Moreover, the low spiritual level is also an important factor here. I believe that religion might help patients to overcome their disease. Patients that did not have this a religious core in themselves demonstrated much worse results, and I included religion as one of the factors. How else can this model be applied? The governmental order issued several years ago includes tuberculosis, hepatitis B and C, STDs, hypertension, and HIV. Patients with these diseases are numerous, and the model can be used for patients with the above-mentioned diseases. This is a universal model, and it can be used at any stage of treatment. Thank you very much. Are you satisfied? Could you please be more brief? Please focus on the questions. The floor is given to Professor Asanovich. Can you hear us? Yes, I can hear you. Dear colleagues, I'm very happy to see you here. I wish you good health. My review is published on the website. The dissertation is relevant because TB is a socially significant disease. Moreover, psychosocial factors play an important role in the progression of the disease. I would like also to say that it is necessary to develop a comprehensive model of psychosocial follow-up. There are few research papers in this area. I believe this is due to the fact that such works employ a variety of methods and a variety of factors. What I found impressive is that you divided the children's group in smaller subgroups. Moreover, you identified different psychological methods that trigger non-compliance and also have an impact on the treatment. You compared adult patients and patients under 18. The research findings can be applied in practice as well. I like it that you describe what a medical psychologist should do in order to provide follow-up. We shouldn't forget that patients spend 9 months in hospitals. The topic of the dissertation is relevant. I would like to highlight again the objects and the goal of the dissertation are in compliance with the topic of the dissertation. The research findings provide the information that is necessary to get an overall picture of the dissertation. I would like to say that the research findings are valid and credible, and this sampling is quite large here. The author should be given the merit for using a wide range of methods. Some of these methods were developed in Russian psychology. Moreover, the degree seeker also uses statistical analysis in her research. So the dissertation complies with the major requirements set forth in the relevant order of St. Petersburg State University, and Elena Zakharova can be awarded the academic degree of the Doctor of Medical Sciences. The specialization is 190004, Medical Psychology. The dissertation is compliant with Section 11 of the above-mentioned order. I would like to say that there are some stylistic inaccuracies in the dissertation. I would like to say that sometimes I felt that the dissertation lacked I can hardly believe that 1,000 patients do not have any deviations or pathologies. I can hardly believe that they did not have any psychological issues. When it comes to statistics, I would like to say that you employ statistical methods. You also conduct multi-factor study. You also conduct linear regression study. I believe it is superfluous. Multi-factor study would have been enough. since we work with latent and covert structures, sometimes it's difficult to identify linear dependency here. Moreover, you do not employ the term statistical significance correctly in the dissertation. You write about different subgroups in the children's group, and you provided a table with different therapeutic targets. I believe you should have included some more specific data to make the model less complex. However, I believe that the overall assessment of the dissertation is positive. Thank you. Do you understand the questions? We studied different patients, and we didn't include the patients which had psychiatric disorders. When we started the work, at first we didn't realize what type of model we would have. Are you satisfied with the results and with the answers? Now the floor is given to Professor Solovyova. The dissertation, rather the topic of the dissertation, is relevant because tuberculosis is a serious disease and it poses a challenge in global healthcare. Moreover, tuberculosis includes the medical aspect and the psychosocial aspect as well. And the dissertation is about the psychosocial aspect of tuberculosis. It focuses on compliance and non-compliance in patients with tuberculosis. I believe that the goal of the dissertation is quite specific. The degree seeker has developed a hypothesis. You used clinical psychological methods and also observational methods. Experimental methods were also employed in the dissertation. I would like to say that you have conducted an important experimental analysis and you have employed a number of methods. The compliance or non-compliance can be predicted using psychological characteristics of patients. Compliance is very important for treating tuberculosis. Moreover, I would like to say that I was impressed by the fact that you identified targets for different age groups. The theoretical relevance is also quite high. You have developed a comprehensive model of psychosocial follow-up of patients with tuberculosis. You have identified the factors that have an impact on the treatment and recovery and on compliance or non-compliance. The practical relevance is related to the fact that you have identified several targets. You have conducted statistical analysis and developed mathematical models. These models can be used in psychosocial follow-up, and they can be used to assess a readiness for compliance in different patients. Moreover, I would like to highlight that you make use of theoretical foundations in your dissertation. The sampling is quite large. I was also impressed by the combination of qualitative and quantitative analysis. The research findings are credible and valid, since you use a range of different methods which are in line with the goal and objectives of the dissertation. I believe that the dissertation is well written and well structured, and the research findings make an important contribution to medical psychology. I do not have any serious objections here, and I would like to emphasize my overall positive assessment of the dissertation. I have a number of questions which do not change an overall positive assessment of the dissertation. Do you think that psychosomatics play an important role in tuberculosis pathogenesis? Patients with tuberculosis have a wide range of psychological and pathopsychological features. Are there any features that are specific for tuberculosis, or rather for patients with tuberculosis? I did not quite understand how you describe adjustment of patients with tuberculosis to their disease. What methods of cognitive behavioral therapy can be recommended to down-regulate anxiety? Please comment on the statement that anxiety is a resource for adaptive behavior. The dissertation by Elena Zakharova complies with the major requirements set forth in Order 6821/1 as of the 1st of September 2016 on the procedure of granting academic degrees at St. Petersburg State University. And Elena Zakharova can be awarded the academic degree of the Doctor of Medical Sciences. The specialization is 190004 Medical Psychology. Thank you. Thank you very much. I give the floor to the degree seeker. The first question was about psychosomatics. We have already talked about the psychosomatic aspect. Ancient doctors were the first to highlight that patients with TB have a specific psychological characteristics. Modern researchers however characterize patients with TB in a similar way. They are difficult to deal with. These patients want revenge. They are choked they are suffocated by their revenge. Sometimes researchers describe patients with tuberculosis using this phrase. And patients with TB react in this way. You also asked about specific features of patients with tuberculosis. TB is a disease which is treated for a long time. The reaction to the diagnosis at first is denial. At first they are ready to comply with the treatment. However, as the disease progresses and as time goes, they stop adhering to treatment. This is the only specific feature of tuberculosis. Only patients with tuberculosis, for some reason, want to stop their treatment. Whenever they feel better, they don't want to treat. They don't want to undergo treatment, and this is the most serious problem, because such non-compliance can lead to MRTB. You also asked about adjustment. Treatment is a long process for tuberculosis. The patient has to adjust to the diagnosis, then they have to adjust to inpatient treatment, then they have to adjust to outpatient treatment. And we must assess if the patient is adjusted to inpatient treatment, if the patient is adjusted to the family environment. Sometimes families break up after the person's diagnosis with tuberculosis because they are afraid to fall ill as well. So adjustment here is both a process and a result. We can use different cognitive behavioral tactics. I would like to focus on the best ones and on those that I like. I like to work with fears. We also keep a diary of anxieties and fears with our patients. We put their fears and anxieties in the black box. We also work with affirmations. We also discuss what they will be doing if tuberculosis is never cured. We discuss how the patient is going to live with tuberculosis. And now a few words about anxiety as a resource. We work with children and teenagers, and we are in contact with them for a long time. A child cannot cope with anxiety of themselves. Therefore, it's really instrumental to regulate anxiety. So the optimal level of anxiety is important here. The optimal level of anxiety is the one that allows the child to cooperate with the doctors. once the patient is not afraid of anything and does not have any anxiety, then I believe that this is quite a rare thing. Patients with TB always have some level of anxiety. So anxiety goes hand in hand with adjustment. Thank you very much. I'm satisfied. I would like to read out my review. I would like to that the dissertation is relevant and it is in compliance with a major trend, namely the trend which includes the psychological aspect in medical treatment. A psychological aspect is included in treatment of different diseases such as asthma, cardiovascular diseases, and so on. Psychological aspect is important for effective treatment of different diseases. My colleagues have already mentioned that theoretical papers do not contain comprehensive analysis of this issue. Therefore, the dissertation is relevant. The dissertation develops the model of psychosocial follow-up of patients with tuberculosis. The overall goal of the dissertation, the objectives of the dissertation are quite relevant. The psychosocial follow-up is instrumental for treatment of patients with tuberculosis. It describes methods employed by clinical psychologists. The model of psychosocial follow-up is based on theoretical findings and it is developed to promote compliance in patients with tuberculosis. I believe that the scientific issue here is quite new. I believe that Elena Zakharova has produced a very important dissertation. She has analyzed the information which is relevant to the psychosocial follow-up of patients with tuberculosis. She has analyzed both Russian and foreign researchers. And she has come up with a number of factors which promote compliance. She focuses on such factors as frustration, anxiety, personal characteristics, coping mechanisms, and other factors. Each of these factors is extremely complex. Each factor can become an object of research. The topic of the dissertation is also quite novel. Because medical psychology, or rather Russian medical psychology, does not focus on psychosocial follow-up of patients with tuberculosis. Moreover, the dissertation includes a an empirical part and a theoretical part. I was also impressed by the fact that you divided the group of patients into 5 subgroups, and each group is characterized by its own factors that trigger non-compliance and is characterized by its specific features. I believe that the dissertation also has practical relevance, and my colleagues have talked at length about the practical relevance of the dissertation. However, I would like to highlight that Elena Zakharova gives a comprehensive description of the research. She tries to make a connection between the theoretical aspect and the practical aspect, and I believe the author should be given merit for this approach. It is important to note that family environment is regarded as a valuable resource here. The dissertation also provides valuable recommendations for clinical psychologists regarding compliance to treatment. The research outcomes are credible and valid. Elena Zakharova uses a wide range of methods in her dissertation. And I would like to highlight the analytical approach of the degree seeker. Moreover, she also conducts a comparative analysis in her dissertation, namely she compares patients with tuberculosis and healthy people. She also employs methods of statistical analysis accurately. I am not going to talk about the structure of the dissertation, since my colleagues have talked about it. I would like to focus on some questions. I have 3 questions, and some of my questions are similar to those posed by my colleague. So the dissertation compares comparative analysis. It compares patients with tuberculosis and healthy people. However, there are factors related to asthma which are similar to those that you have identified for tuberculosis. So I have a question. Are the factors that you are describing in your dissertation specific to tuberculosis? Can you identify any specific features for patients with tuberculosis? Psychological, or rather psychosocial follow-up is effective, I believe. However, it is limited in time. It's a temporary measure, I would say. Can you identify the criteria, which means that psychosocial follow-up is no longer necessary for the patient? You described different methods for psychosocial follow-up, namely remedial methods. These methods are employed in different types of follow-up. For example, in social follow-up, in business follow-up, and so on. What remedial methods are preferable for psychosocial follow-up of patients with TB? And I would like to say that the dissertation complies with the major requirements set forth in Order 6821/1. It's a complete research paper which makes a contribution to medical science. It complies with the major requirements set forth in order as of the 1st of September 2016 on the procedure of granting academic degrees in St. Petersburg State University. Elena Zakharova can be awarded the academic degree of the Doctor of Medical Sciences, or rather Psychological Sciences, Specialisation 190004. The floor is yours. Thank you very much for your questions. I believe that the data I received are in line with the research findings obtained by other researchers. However, the data were quite fragmented, and in my dissertation I provide a comprehensive approach. A few years ago I wrote a thesis about remedial therapy of patients with lung diseases. There were two groups, patients with tuberculosis and patients with COPD. I compared the results in these two groups, and I was able to identify specific features of patients with tuberculosis. I would like to highlight again that tuberculosis is the only disease where the risk of non-compliance is so high. Patients stop their treatment. Do you have any statistics here? About 15 or 20% of patients stop their treatment and we cannot get them back. What are the criteria saying that psychosocial follow-up is not necessary? Time limit is not necessary here. And if the patient is willing to receive psychological support, they can get it after being discharged from hospital. But when we talk about inpatient treatment, we can say that we can assess the patient's willingness to get back to their environment. Is the patient ready to change their job, or is the patient ready to get back to their job? Is the patient ready to communicate with their family members? Is the family ready to get back to hospital in case of relapse? There's a wide range of methods. It depends on the clinical psychologist, on the hospital, and so on. I use a number of methods in my work. I believe that a confrontational method is also important. I also use art therapy. I believe that you like it. I accept your answer. We have listened to the reviews and to the replies. Is everybody satisfied with the answers? provided by Elena Zakharova. There are no comments or objections. We have not received any questions by email. There are no questions. I give the floor to the research advisor. Please speak about the personality of the degree seeker. Dear colleagues, I would like to start with the formal part. I believe that this formal part is important. Moreover, it is relevant to the personal characteristics. Elena Zakharova is a young lady. She graduated from Samara University in 2000. 3 years later, she received a degree, an academic degree, and several years later she became the head of the Department of General Psychology, and then she became the dean of the faculty. And she was the dean of that faculty for 10 years. Samara School of Clinical Psychology is a famous school of clinical psychology. Graduates of this university work in different research institutes and in different educational universities around Russia. Elena Zakharova was in charge of the school for 10 years. And at present, she's the director of the Institute of Social and Digital Development of Medicine in Samara State Medical University. The institute includes 9 departments. Linguistic departments are also part of this institute. Department of Bioethics, Department of Medical Physics, Medical Cybernetics, Department of Psychiatry, and so on. I believe that Samara Medical University ranks 3rd among Russian medical universities. And Elena Zakharova is in charge of this institute, and I believe that this is quite an achievement. I would like to focus on the personal characteristics as well. "800 patients with TB were included in the research. Some of them are former convicts, some of them are from dysfunctional backgrounds. You can see how difficult it is to work with such people. I would like to say that she is also a very well-organized researcher. She needs specific personal qualities to motivate such patients. Moreover, I would like to say that she is involved in clinical research, and she is also involved in psychotherapeutic work and in social work. She works in TB hospitals, and she also works in a hematological hospital. So she is involved in administrative work, in clinical work, and in research work. I have listed all the papers that she has received from the Health Ministry. She has received a number of reference letters from the Health Ministry. She collected material for her doctoral research for about 18 years. And she came here and asked me to be her research advisor about 2 years ago. And I believe that she has very good communicative skills. She's a highly intelligent young woman. I was very impressed by her. She's a well-rounded person. Moreover, she is a very empathic person. And she shows respect, a high level of respect to St. Petersburg State University, to our department and to the professors. She's very polite and she's very industrial. She's very industrious. And I believe that she's a researcher with high potential. She has undergone COVID-19, and her family members also suffered from COVID-19. Thank you very much. I think I would like to work in Samara State Medical University. This is a very well-equipped university. It is one of the most advanced universities in Russia. I was really impressed by what she told me about Samara Medical State University. We can have a break for discussing the results, but I believe that it is not necessary. I believe that we can vote in favor or against conferring the degree. Do you agree with my suggestion? Do we need a break? Do you think we should start voting? I don't think that we need a break, because everyone is in favor, I believe, of conferring the academic degree. Okay. How do you vote? I vote in favor of conferring the academic degree, and I share my colleague's opinion. My next colleague, how do you vote? I vote in favor of conferring the academic degree of the Doctor of Psychological Sciences. Marat Aliyevich, how do you vote? I haven't changed my opinion. I vote in favor of conferring the academic degree. Svetlana Leonidovna, how do you vote? I vote in favor. I share my colleague's opinion. I also vote in favor of conferring the academic degree. I believe that this degree dissertation complies with the major requirements. So, dear colleagues, five members have voted for conferring the academic degree. Nobody voted against and nobody abstained from voting. So the academic board has made a decision to confer the academic degree of the Doctor of Psychological Sciences to Elena Zakharova. You are given the floor, dear members of the Dissertation Board. I would like to devote this dissertation to Dr. Pahomov. Unfortunately, he passed away several years ago, but he played an important role in my career. I worked with him hand in hand for many years. He was my research advisor. I would like to thank St. Petersburg State University for giving me this opportunity to present my dissertation here. This is one of the most advanced universities in Russia. I would like to thank Rector of Samara State University for giving me an opportunity to write my dissertation, and thank you for their support. I would like to thank all members of the Dissertation Board for reading my dissertation and for participation in the discussions despite the current situation. I would like to thank my research advisor, Professor Shelkova. I am really honored to talk to you, to have a chance to learn something from you. I would like to thank my colleagues. I couldn't imagine a better team of co-workers. I believe they will congratulate me when I come back to Samara, and I would like to thank my colleagues from my department for giving me opportunity to write this dissertation. I would like to thank my parents as well, my mother and my father, who believe in me and who love me and provide their support. And I would like to thank my daughter. She supported me for a long time. She was very patient and understanding, and everything I do in my life I do for her. Thank you very much. I would like to congratulate Elena Zakharova, and I would like to wish her good luck. Thank you very much. Good luck. The session is over.